Huge thanks to our sponsors for making ResolveCon 24 possible. Motion VFX makes the best plugins for DaVinci Resolve. They have plugins to quickly add beautiful graphics to any kind of project you're working on, and they're compatible with both Mac and Windows. And right now you can get their mHello 3D for free. This is a pack of super useful 3D shapes that you can add to any video and take your visuals up a notch. Just click right here or the link in the description. And of course, ResolveCon would not be possible without Blackmagic Design. They just came out with the full release of DaVinci Resolve 19. For editing, color, effects, and audio, it's pretty much everything you need to make any kind of project in DaVinci Resolve. You can download DaVinci Resolve 19 right here or in the link in the description.
My name is Patrick. I run a channel called Patrick Stirling, which is also my name, where I talk about Resolve and a little more specifically Fusion and some of the hidden power there, and then also presets and templates and titles and that sort of thing. For those who don't know, I also work for Motion VFX, one of the big sponsors of ResolveCon, which is very cool when different things come together. I looked it up shortly before the presentation because I've been with Motion VFX for a few years now, but I was part of ResolveCon first by just a few months. But I'm a ResolveConer, tried and true. But Motion VFX is really cool. There will be a portion of this segment where we talk about Motion VFX and like how they're sponsoring this event. But we'll tie it into some of the cool power of the shape system. So that will be very fun. But without further ado, quick question for anyone watching. Who is or has been or is scarred from being scared of the Fusion page? If anyone can let me know if at some point they opened Fusion and immediately left it. Because Fusion can be scary, because if you show up for a talk about the Fusion page, you could be in for all of this. Because these are all the different nodes you can use in the Fusion page, depending on how you count. This chunk here is some like open effects, but this isn't including any like LUTs which you can drag in as individual nodes. This isn't including like extra macros. Fusion can be a whole lot, but especially when you're diving in, it doesn't have to be. So that's why in this presentation, we are just going to talk about these guys. These are all the nodes in the shapes system. If you've been sticking around today, we'll cover some small ground that Jake covered in his earlier talk, all about expressions. We'll do some very minor expression work here. And he also showed off some of that work in the shape system, because there's some cool stuff in the shape system. But first things first, why the shape system? And then we'll talk about like what it really is. I'm excited to talk about shapes because one, I think even for people who have been active in Resolve, they might not have circled back to shapes since it was first introduced. And especially some of the small updates have like really like ramped up some of the cool things you can do in the shape system. But also, I think the shape system is sort of like a cool little like walled garden for someone dipping their toe in the Fusion page. It can be a complete system unto itself. It has limitations, it has some quirks, but especially in 19, full release out today, you can do a whole lot natively in the shape system. So if all those nodes scare you, hey, just get familiar with these nodes and you can already do a whole lot of stuff, and that's pretty exciting. So what is it? Why do we need a separate system for shapes when you could make a shape like a dozen different ways outside of the shape system? Well, this is the system for vector graphics inside the Fusion page. So vector graphics, to put it lightly, and because let's see if I actually understand vector graphics. Vector graphics deal with paths more than a lot of like hard pixel values. And we're going to demonstrate that off the bat with a simple comparison to demonstrate first one of the big strengths of the shape system. First, I'm going to start outside the shape system. If I create a normal, completely normal text plus node and type in something like KC, and I just scale this way down. Say we are making a complex graphic with like lots of data or something else, and I will even make, hey, a green background with a line, very fancy. We merge this together, and wow, we've got our awesome graphic with our line, and appropriately sized for this graphic, this little Casey down here. But what happens if later down the chain, you decide, oh, for whatever reason, I really want to zoom into this text. Well, if you go and you really crank up the size on a transform after the fact, oh no, this is very bad. This looks awesome. You can barely read it. And that is because outside of the shape system, all along your node tree, you are dealing with hard rendered pixel values all over the place. So this text node, it is creating this node, but when I pulled this size down, I am saying, okay, only make the text this big coming out of this one node based on some hard pixel value. So it is only generating so many pixels. And if later you want to scale that up, you're going to be in trouble. You can even see even just the straight line mask is starting to get a little fuzzy. But if I give myself some room and we start to build something similar with an SText node, and I say Alex this time, and scale that way down, S rectangle, that we are doing the same thing with. Oh, how small did I make that? Oh, they're not merged together. Make it green, because so now I have something similar, and in my viewer, you can zoom in, and hey, if I preview that viewer, it's not that bad, because we are previewing inside the shape system. And indeed, if I make an S transform afterwards, I will do a quick expression, which I believe Jake showed off this specific one, pair the X size to the Y size, so that we can scale up similar. And if I scale that about the same way, boom, we've got text. Nice and crispy. It is preserving all of that data. Now, we did run into something interesting. When I zoomed in, even on this graphic, we still had really good quality. And that comes to another like foundational truth of what the shape system is about, right? It is a dedicated system. And there are a few of those in the Fusion page. We have the shapes system, we have particles, we have the 3D system, and all of those have their own render nodes. So we have this S render node that if I wanted to take this graphic, put it back on the edit page, or take this graphic and use it with any other tools in the Fusion page, I would have to connect it to the S render node. I couldn't create a normal transform and come out of this shape transform into that one. It wouldn't work, but coming out of the render into that transform, it will, and then I can do any extra stuff to it. And that is because, like I said, this is keeping track of that raw path data. And when the shape system first came out, you could not do this step I had done previously of clicking through like normal nodes, right? This is how, if you do anything in the Fusion page, you're used to this kind of work. But when the shape system first came out, you could only preview the render node. You could still build effects with all the nodes before it, but you couldn't like hop along that path, which is like a tremendous quality of life update. But it is important to note that even though you can preview along these paths, the fact I can zoom in this much on this merge shows me that I'm not dealing with raw pixel values, because this is only like an HD composition. I shouldn't be able to zoom in that much. Any node you preview before the S-render node, it's just helping you out. It's just giving you a preview, not the actual image. If I come to this S-render now, and let's say I even scale this back down. Oh yeah, something like even 5, smaller. No, all the way down. Make that smaller. If I go back to the S-render and then I try to zoom it in, oh no, it's back to looking bad, because the S-render gets us back those raw pixel values. And that is a pretty big strength of the shape system, small things like zooming. Additionally, sometimes outside of the shape system, if you are just like moving different elements around frame, sometimes when you process them, if you push something out of the frame and try to push it back, like when you pushed it out, it like cropped out that data. So like sometimes you can't pull back things once you push them out of frame. Sometimes with simple transforms you can if it's keeping track of the frame, but sometimes, you know, you're processing the frame, you're processing the pixels, and if you tell Resolve it can stop thinking about something, it might just stop thinking about that thing. But the power of a system is that it just keeps all that data and doesn't dump out raw pixels until that final S render. I consider that a pretty like straightforward pro. Like that's really nice. Another awesome thing about the shape system, really because of this, is performance. The shape system, it performed good. It performs pretty good. Like I said, it's not dealing like if I had this text where I was bringing in, or not images, because you can't really bring images in the shape system, but if I had like lots of shapes outside of the shape system, I would need a background node for all of those. And even before I brought them together, all those background nodes would be rendering full pixels, and then it would have to figure out how to bring all those pixels over each other inside the shape system. I'm just creating shapes. I'm just creating paths. And it doesn't actually go through that rendering process, which can be heavy depending on your scene, until we get to the sRender node. So hey, 2 pros, pretty great. Let's talk about some cons, or sort of pros and cons. One being a straightforward limitation of the shape system right now. Shapes, you're not going to get blurs or glows because we are dealing with those hard paths, right? It needs to, how do you blur a path? You can blur things after the shape system, but like if you're telling Resolve, hey, here's the line I care about, it makes sense to me why blurring would be tough in that situation. But who knows? They're black magic. Maybe someday they'll add it. But the other mixed bag pros and cons has to do with the coordinate system in the shapes system. And this will absolutely trip up a lot of people. And if you already have a lot of experience in Resolve, it might trip you up one way. If you get started in Fusion and you get really comfortable with the shape system and then try to leave the shape system, you might get tripped up the other way. So let's explain. If I create a plain rectangle mask node, off the bat, you will see it as a black and white image. This is mask data, right? So if I were to apply this as a mask over a background shape, which, hey, let's do that, make it green, then I can tell before I connect it, okay, this white area is where it will be solid. The black will be like see-through. One of those is opaque. I forget what the word opaque means all the time, but hey, if I preview the background, you only see the image that is being masked where that mask itself is white. That's not what I was talking about, but important to know. But the rectangle itself, Jake also showed this off, and it's important. First off, position. This rectangle is in the center of our frame, and we can see the center is 0.5, 0.5. If I make it 0, 0, it's bottom left-hand corner. If I make it 1, 1, top right-hand corner. That is how all things will work in the normal Fusion system, right? Outside of the shape system. Like once you're getting in like the normal workspace, this is always how things are going to break down. If you make this position 20 something, it'll be way out in left field. But by default, 0.5, 0.5 center, and height and width. This is very interesting because if you think of a rectangle and you say, okay, make the height equal the width, what do you got? A square. Here, the height equals the width. They are both 0.5. What do we have? Not a square. We have a rectangle. And as Jake pointed out, that is because this is reliant on the aspect ratio of our clip. And as he also pointed out, all of these, if we bring this up to 1, it just reaches the edge of our frame. So a height and width of 1 and 1 will completely fill the frame. So if we are in a horizontal composition, 0.5, 0.5 will create pretty much a scaled down version of your composition, you know, just taking up half the space. And we can even preview this if this was on a vertical timeline by changing up the custom coordinate or the custom values here. If I go 1080 by 1920, hey, if this was on a vertical timeline with none of these controls changed, this is still 0.5, 0.5 over here. All of a sudden, our rectangle is now a rectangle flipped the other way. And especially if you are making graphics or effects that need to be used on both timelines, or if, like myself and lots of other people, you are getting into making your own like presets, titles, templates, you can see how if you make like a lower third all stretched this way, and then you toss it on a vertical timeline, it's going to be like squeezed this way and down here. And that will be really frustrating if you're not expecting it. So let's talk about what's going on in our little friend, the S rectangle node. I preview that, and you'll see, first off, this is not masking data. It is just, boom, creating a shape. Outside, you need the mask, and then you need a background for the color. Here, it's a rectangle node. It makes a rectangle. You can set the color here. But instead of a single point, it has X and Y offsets. And you'll notice that in the very middle of our frame, it's 0 and 0. And if I push this to the far right edge of the frame, it will be 0.5. If I push it to the top of the frame, will it be 0.5? No. It'll be a little over a quarter. As for height and width, 0.5, 0.5, and we have a perfect square. Interesting again. If we scale the width up to 1, will this reach only the very edge of our frame? Yes. If we push the height up to 1, it goes way past the edge of our frame, but at the end, still makes a perfect square. So you can see how this could be a stumbling block if you dive in and either you are not familiar with it all, or if you're used to only doing it like it does in the rest of Fusion, right? So what's happening is that this is still dependent on not even the aspect ratio of your composition, but just like the horizontal width, right? If I pull up this width on a value of 1 will always reach the outside edges. And that width of 1 starts making sense when you think of this X position. So in X position, you only need to push it 0.5 to get to the very edge. Therefore, the entire width of the comp is double that. It's 1. Now, the Y and height options are not dependent on the height of the composition, but are dependent on that same width position. So no matter what comp you're working with, the width at 1 will always equal the edge, and the height will always be the same actual distance to match. So I can't do that same thing I did where I went into this preview node and flip it to a vertical, because remember, this is just the preview. We're not dealing with pixel values yet. But if I pull up an sRender node and do the same thing I did earlier, where I flip these, 1920, you see, oh, this is at a value of 1, 1. We are still reaching the horizontal edges, but where in a horizontal comp, a height value of 1 went way past the edges. Here, it only goes up to the point where it equals a perfect square. So we do have two systems, but they are both independently, like, logically consistent. If and when there are instances when you need those systems to play nice together, you can do it based on that knowledge. You can actually go in and do, those basic expressions to, okay, look at the height, look at the width, times this by that. But especially with something like the S-text node, which we just got in version 19, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit, especially with some of the updates to the shape system, you can do a whole lot more exclusively inside the shape system. So for your own benefit, I personally wouldn't try to put myself in too many situations where I need to make these systems talk to each other, but they do work. And we can even show off something neat at a basic level if we get back to this render, this rectangle. Let me go ahead. I'm going to make this little rectangle. I'm going to make an S-ellipse node. Right after this, we are going to walk through all the nodes individually, but we're still talking about the system, right? So if I make this little tiny ball, little tiny ball up here, make it green, then boom. Then remember what we said about the width, the X distance being 1 and the width being 1 across the entire screen. If I come into this ellipse, I can change that X offset, make a simple expression. Again, Jake's presentation was awesome. Go watch that if you haven't. And if I point this to S rectangle 3 dot width, and I do that, yes, divided by 2, boom, it will snap to that outside edge. And on this S rectangle, whenever I change that width, it will stay stuck to that outside edge. If I went back and divided that by -2, it would go on the other edge. This is like this shouldn't even count as rigging, but it is the bare bones level of like taking advantage of knowing how this system works. Because if I told you otherwise, like, hey, parent these things together, it's like you couldn't just merge them and have to transform after the fact to like stretch one but not the other. Like I'm not changing the X offset on the S rectangle, but once you have a foundational knowledge of how that works, you can start to do some cool things. Excuse me. Like Darren, who kicked off today, I am also myself getting past a little sickness, but hey, we're going at the end of the day, so I had all day to hydrate. Very neat. And that's, you can see how that's a pros and cons. I don't often try to explain why Fusion works the way it does, just how it works, right? The people who make Fusion and Resolve, they are very smart. I think they do a good job. Some stuff like this, where it's just like they decided to do things a little differently. Okay, I just need to know how it works, and then I can continue to do some cool stuff. Nice. That's the system. Let's talk about the nodes in the system. We've already seen a few of them, and they can be lumped into a few basic categories. I want to make sure I didn't delete anything. S ellipse. Did I pull over? Okay, rectangle. We still got it. Let's talk about just making something, right? You can make a star. The star is very similar to, well, let's talk. You can do multiple points. You can change the depth of those points. Oh, this is very similar, kind of, to this n-gon, which is the polygon. How many sides do you want? On the star, you can always like pull up this depth to like make it about the same. But like, I don't know, use the one you're actually going for, n-gon. Both of them can make a triangle. Oh, but this one you would have to do it that way. Okay, if you want a triangle, I'd do n-gon. We got a B-spline, which is similar to the B-spline tool in the normal masking tools if you never use that. You draw paths, and it sort of like auto curves inside of those. I'm not super sure when this would be most useful inside the shape system. I believe I've seen the B-spline tool used the most in like traditional rotoscoping. Maybe I'm just ignorant about a big field where it's used because we have this, but we also have just the S, not that one, S polygon node. When like, hey, you draw a shape and boom, that's the shape you've got. And of course, we have the S ellipse, which you can make a circle thing, S rectangle, square, or rectangle thing, and then S text, which is neat. We're going to circle back to S text because it is so neat, because it's so boring. Not boring. I'm excited to talk about the S text, new in 19. But first, I want to circle back to all these other ones, because all these other sort of generators, by default, they're solid, but you can uncheck that, pull up the border width, and when you uncheck solid, you get access to these options down here. So all of them, you can start to draw on, or when they're partially drawn on, change how they rotate around. Also, little pro tip, this position by default only goes up to 1, but you can always type in this box more, something like 3, if you want it to completely rotate around itself. Now, the S text node does not have that automatically built in, but one of the next categories we are going to talk about, where it's they're kind of like effects, but more like node modifiers, like, okay, you made something, what do you want to do with it kind of deal, is just a simple outline tool. And something like this polygon, yeah, if I plug it into the outline, then it gives me those same controls. Now, number one, this is useful coming out of the S text because, pull it down, and where you couldn't do this natively on the text, now you can do some really cool draw on effects on text. And if this was possible before version 19, I didn't know how to do it. I saw other people maybe figured it out, but it was a lot more work than this. But like this outline tool doesn't exist solely for the S-text node. Like if you have these other options, why do you still need this extra node? And we will talk about that when we talk about our cool friend S-Boolean. But for now, what else we got? We've got a simple S-expand node where, let me make this solid again. That's solid. If you just want to expand, or can we go negative? We can go negative. Oh, not that negative. Oh, yeah, just only down to -1, and I made it very, very small. Let's not do that. You can expand. We talked about outline. We can duplicate. This is still very big, so we'll also pull in this S-transform, make it very small, and then make select copies offset by a certain amount. You can also duplicate along a path. This is interesting. The shape system, this is a new functionality in 19 as well. And as you can see, it's doing some interesting things, but not precisely along this path. I've also toyed, I don't think we'll talk about it in the sort of grab bag feature at the end. But paths and shapes can be interesting, but they can do some fun stuff. But you can still, if you know what you're going for, you can still get there, just maybe in a roundabout way. We got jitter, if you want to pull this up, and especially when you change this to random. We got some little shake or a fixed if you just want to move around in this way. It has this point jitter, which does some like this kind of stuff. Don't know when you'd need that, but you got it. And kind of like the outline, we have this S change style option, which, yeah, just like changes the color or the opacity. But you also have options for that on the individual nodes. What's going on? We will get to that very soon. The last thing after this S transform is, yes, tiny. If you want a whole grid of things, you can do it. Again, revisit Jake's presentation for how to tag on expressions to do crazy thing and like auto fit and that neat stuff. So those are kind of, you got a shape. What can you do with it? Some of those things. But where it starts getting very exciting is it's just not those individual shapes. Like, of course, you've got a merge node, right? Like you've got an ellipse, and you could bring in a star or triangle, make it tiny, not that tiny. Make it tiny, merge them together, and oh, cool, you got a whale with a thing on its head. Neat, right? I like, yeah, merge, right? Just put them together. But what happens if I take this whale with a thing on its head and plug it into this S outline tool? All of a sudden, oh, you see the circle, you see the star. What if I was making an actual whale with a thing on its head, and I wanted an outline of the entire thing? Well, that's when our little friend, the S-Boolean tool, comes in. And the S-Boolean tool, very, very cool. As I understand, Booleans across lots of different software are very useful for like the raw interaction of like base elements. So like they're in like some 3D software. But if I take this ellipse and I take this star, put them together, by default, oh no, you only see where they interact because this operation is set to intersection. If I change that to union, oh, that looks kind of like what the merge did. If I set it to subtract, it takes one, subtracts the other, and XOR, you see both, but where they interact, you don't see them. But if I go back to union and I plug that into the S outline, all of a sudden we've got an outline of a whale with a thing on its head. Neat. And yeah, once you come from this Boolean, it treats it like one singular object for all these other effects or ways you could modify this, which is pretty cool. Once you like, there's a lot of functionality in Boolean. New in 19 as well is the style mode. If I preview that by itself, union, if I keep this on keep, then go back and change like the ellipse color, it keeps them separate even on the Boolean. But I just noticed, I don't know whether this is a bug or not. I might report it if it is a bug. but that also separates the paths. So it doesn't do like one and then the other. I guess that kind of makes sense, right? Because like, do you want it to treat it like one path or not? And if it's colored differently, it has to stay two paths. I guess that makes sense, but I don't have to like it. Or that works. And then of course, you got the sRender node. The sRender node, nothing too exciting, but hopefully at the end we'll talk about one thing tangentially related to the sRender node where we can do some more cool stuff. But speaking of cool stuff, I want to show off especially one thing that I think is very cool, but I only made that cool thing because I was asked to make it for Motion VFX. So let's talk about them. And we're going to show off some cool stuff. But hey, let's cut to the chase. Aside from sponsoring the event and giving away tons of packs for everyone, we've also got, hey, a little promo code. If you head over to motionvfx.com, hey, I can play this. 15% off site-wide at checkout with code ResolveCon. And there is a lot to check out. Motion VFX has been in business for over 15 years. A lot of that time, they were exclusively making presets and plugins for Final Cut. Then, like a lot of us, they saw this really neat thing happening over here with DaVinci Resolve, and they were like, we've got these packs. We should get some people who know some things about DaVinci Resolve to remake these packs that people already like in this new software. And they found those people like me, and they've done a whole lot since then. This guy, over 60,000 users of the DaVinci Resolve project so far since launching, like maybe a little over 3 years ago, specifically for Resolve. Really exciting. Over 60 packs, I believe, across all. But heading over to our little Motion VFX website, we even got a little header option. If you've seen talk about DaVinci Resolve or Motion VFX through ResolveCon, but you haven't actually gone to the website, this is your call to action. Go to the website, check out Resolve. New exciting things. Hello just launched, and it is free. News, lots of exciting packs. We did a pack with MKBHD and iJustine. Lots of like YouTuber-based packs. I really love how a lot of these packs are like use focused, right? So if you're doing a lot of wedding work, just pick up the wedding pack. If you're doing like documentary stuff, that's neat. You know what's neater? Straight up free stuff. Type free in the search bar, and boom, all of these free for Resolve that you can pick up, see if you like them, see if you like how they're built. You'll head over to the little handy utility they have, MInstaller, to keep track of anything you download. If there's updates, it'll tell you, it'll keep track of your licenses. Very neat, very cool. But you know, all that work around it is neat. Work around it, including straight up their YouTube channel that doesn't just talk about their products, but also just talks, hey, top transitions, small tutorials, lots of other things. And if you want a little more assurance, they're also amazingly well reviewed on Trustpilot, which is a website for this kind of thing. If you want to hear people gushing about them, you can head over there or just ask me. I'm happy to do it. But of course, hey, you know what matters from a company that makes presets? The presets. So let's check some out. A lot of the stuff I work in has been very like data focused, like a lot of hard values, which I'm very excited to talk about. And as you can see here in the inspector, all of them built with like really slick controls, stay dynamic. As you might have seen on that free window, we have a ResolveCon pack that we made last year. And I believe along with that discount, that this pack will only be available through that 28th as well. So pick up the pack if you want some ResolveCon branding. That Hello I talked about as well, if you want some slick 3D objects. But like I said, a lot of stuff I've done for them outside of this one. That was fun. A lot of like data visualization, counters, and two big benefits of the stuff we've been doing in Resolve. Number one, I talked about the benefit of the shape system for working on vertical timelines. Not everything they do is built in the shape system, but everything they do has these handy controls down at the bottom to work across horizontal and vertical timelines. Very cool. And also, because the team, the entire team, not just me, takes advantage of some fun stuff in Fusion, we can do cool things like this, right? Just a little grid, like a breakdown of some sort of finances. But say I don't want this entry one. If I completely uncheck that, it gets rid of it here. It gets rid of that portion of the pie chart, and it affects this total value over here. If I change this slider, you see all three of those correctly updating. If I made this a perfect quarter of the total amount, you would see that perfectly reflected in this graph. This is functionality that does not exist in the Final Cut version of this effect, because I didn't make that version, and I don't know how to make presets for Final Cut. But as the team learns more, as all of us, like I learned a whole lot from Jake. I'm gonna talk about variables and all my expressions now. As the general knowledge base of Fusion grows, then everyone will be able to make like more dynamic presets that will go on, help learn more people. If you want some fun experiments, pick a random motion VFX preset and try to rebuild it. And if you want an extra fun sneak peek behind the curtain, peek behind the curtain, sneak peek behind the curtain. Wow. Last big preset I want to show off, which circles us back, is a fun little like blueprint layout preset, right? This was for a real estate pack by default. Yeah, it's a room. And you could come in, change the height and width. You can see that's even pulling in some of those like doors and windows. You can turn any of them on or off. You could build like an entire like actual layout of a house with this, right? You could change all of these doors to windows. Oh, if I turned it back on, change their position. You can see you can't push things past the edge. It stays in frame. It stays nice. And all of that, if you want that peek behind the curtain, all of these purple nodes, which build this effect, all of them shape nodes. And it's all, using that Boolean tool. It's all using expressions and modifiers. By the way, my breakout session later this week will all be about like those, not necessarily a step up from expressions, but in the world of expressions, right? You've got expressions and modifiers and publishing controls. We'll talk about that. Probably not in terms of this specific preset, but a lot of that went into this one too. And something not necessarily the most flashy, but what I really get into is that same sort of functionality. Like this preset does all the things you want it to do, and it like plays by its own rules, right? Like look at the window up top, it slides with these master dimensions. The performance is pretty great because it's in the shape system. Yes, this is still technically part of the ad read segment, but now I'm just gushing about a cool thing I made inside the shape system. I barely touched the shape system before I made this, and now I want to use it all over the place. And sometimes I can't, and I have to go back and making it the other way. But super cool. And yeah, even if it's not flashy, even if it's not even like it's all like white, right? I believe last year when Casey did a segment on some cartoons, like making cartoons, I believe that was primarily in the shape system. If you want something that looks a little friendlier, but still pretty neat. So as far as a final product, something like that is very exciting. And even though I'm the one telling you about Motion VFX, I'm also presenting here. So I want to say, hey, thanks, Motion VFX, for sponsoring ResolveCon, because we all need more ResolveCon. So let's talk about some small things that are very exciting as well. We've talked about the general system of the shapes system. We've talked about like the individual nodes, how to put some of them together at a bare level, what you can build to. But there is some fun stuff along the way. You know how I said Polygon that shape nodes only ever work with nodes inside the shapes nodes, well, that's kind of a lie. Like, yes, you can't make a normal transform tool. Oh, it automatically made an S transform tool because it's smart. But like, you can't plug this into a transform tool, but you can plug this fun shape into one random node not in the shape system. That being the extrude 3D node. If I connect that up, preview that, then all of a sudden we are in a 3D workspace. And that image is still like, it looks like it's just on a 2D plane, right? But let me even go in here, make it solid, bring up the border width. Yeah, now it looks even weirder. But we have a control. We can pull up this extrusion depth. And if we preview on shadows in our preview, hey, all of a sudden we have a custom extruded path. This was a lot harder. You needed a lot of like funky external tools before they added this one feature. And yes, we are using the most bare bone entry, right? But if I come back to this one, right? Where's my fish? If I come back to my fish, I roll that up. All the other processing you can do inside the shape system, you can bring into this one. So as complex, you can pull in an entire grid of shapes, or all these outlines, all those weird jittery shapes, pull that into 3D. That'll be pretty wild. Can get you up and running. And of course, you can layer these on top of each other. Once you're at this point, you're just in a normal 3D workspace. You can use this with any other 3D assets, which I think is pretty slick. And for as like strict as a lot of these systems are, small things like this, where it's like, hey, this system, let's just make work with this system over here. Why not? There is another similar exception between the particle system and the 3D system. You can create a 3D shape or like a complex 3D model, all sorts of stuff. And you can send that directly into the particle system and spawn that shape or like variations of that shape on like every particle that particle system creates. There is an incredible video. I see it shared all the time by DV Resolve, also sponsoring ResolveCon on their Twitter. It gets shared by them a lot, and it's always great to see. It's this old video. Ooh, Gadali might know by someone. Is it someone Gadzar or if Gadali knows and he shares it, it's incredible. Using that system, he created an arrow in the 3D system, right? And then he had this particle system over here, and you can just spawn particles and be like, hey, particle, shoot this way, and gravity will pull you back down and stop when you hit the ground. And the particle can do that, but using that other system, which I can't even remember what that specific node is called, but using that same sort of interaction, you can say, okay, spawn an arrow on all of these particles, and then you have a sky full of arrows shooting through the sky, and they all stop when they hit the ground. Incredible, and only possible when Fusion thinks like this. When Fusion says, okay, we have these sort of like little walled gardens, we have these little systems, but where can we bend the rules a little bit? And for something like custom extruded paths, like that's really neat. I'm not sure what sort of options we have for like this kind of smoothing stuff, but the fact that it exists at all is pretty great. Last thing I want to talk about is the thing I kind of teased, talking about this sRender node. And we're going to demonstrate it at a very bare bones level with an sRectangle node connected to an sRender. And I'm going to create an instanced copy of this sRectangle node, make another sRender. And after this first one, I'm going to create a simple glow. Remember, this is something you can't do inside the system, but once you're after that sRender, you can. Boom. Now the sphere is glowing. And if I connect this second render back up afterwards, it will merge that second copy over, but like that won't really work any different because the white area is still like it's merging over itself, but it's white over white. You can't see it. But if I come to this instance, come to this style, If you don't know what an instance node is, it's like a copy of a node that you can selectively uncopy certain elements. So to demonstrate, like these are exactly the same, right? I can come to the instance. You see this green outline on all these shapes. If I right click and come to D-instance color group, then hey, I can make that second one green. The first one is still red, but if I pull this viewer here, all the other controls are still linked. So if I go to that final merge, now we have that green square merged back over the glowing white square right behind it. And this is basic, but this is super valuable to keep in mind, because even if you're building a complex giant node inside the shape system, at any point, you can take the output of one of those nodes and either branch it off, do something else with it inside the shape system, or send it right to an sRender node and modify it in any way outside of the shape system, or something like this, selectively create an instance node and de-instance it. If there's something you want to do with an element outside of the shape system, you can do that. You can't bring it formally back into the shape system, but at that point, like if you just had a glowing thing here and a green one here, you can comp them back together or combine them back together after the shape system, and still do some. That's a great step to slowly expand your arsenal. But you can definitely do a lot natively inside the shape system. And I don't think there's a ton of crazy overwhelming options, but it's all about like getting in and playing with what you want. Even combining simple shapes, you can do a whole lot at a foundational level, and it's pretty neat. I'm feeling pretty good about that. I have one thing that I wouldn't even show, but I would tease. So I'm going to tease that until Casey pops up. The last thing, which I talked about in a recent video, but I won't go over here. You saw when I drew that path on the screen a little while ago using the sDuplicate node. That path's got a little funky, but in a good way. Paths. Something is possible with paths now that wasn't outside of the system. If you wanted like a draw on arrow effect where the arrowhead stayed like tied to the arrow as it drew on, that used to, it is still broken outside of the shape system. If you do it, there's like a workaround inside the shape system that takes a few extra levels to get going, but it is possible. And hopefully, that's something I want to explore more. But at least another cool thing.
Awesome. Hey man, this was great, dude. That was definitely drinking from a fire hydrant, but that was amazing, man. I think did you go over every node in the shape system?
I think so. Some of them very quickly, but like
yeah, that's pretty crazy. This is such a powerful system, and I think the possibilities are. It's all in once you understand what all of these, there's not that many nodes, but once you understand what they all do, then you can combine them together in all these different crazy ways that, stuff like merging them together and running through, S-Booleans and that kind of thing. It's really fantastic stuff, man.
Yeah, thanks. It's the kind of thing I definitely want more people to dive in, because they'll figure out things. They'll figure out small use cases for all these little options, and like the jitter option. Someone will use this for something really cool.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we have some questions. Let's go for it here. So first question, is there a way to get an SVG file converted into the Fusion shape system?
Not as smoothly as I feel like there should be. It's in Fusion, right? If you import an SVG, it will still recreate it in the native like a masking and pathing system.
Mm-hmm.
Jake Whip just talked about this, right? Jake, does he have?
Yeah, I think so. There are ways to kind of convert those masks into shapes, and it's not terrible, but it's not really smooth.
Yeah, and it's a bit more like figuring out the differences between those systems, right? And like auto-conforming it yourself.
Yep. Yeah, it's a lot of that. All right. Next question. Can you do a pixel-based movements in Fusion, or does it always reference the comp size, like a square with exactly 30 by 30 at an exact position?
I mean, there's something in the back of my mind. I think I'm confusing it with something else. Because you do have, yeah, what I'm confusing it in my mind for is on colors, you have the 0 to 1 slider, and you can change that to be the 0 to 255, like that scale.
Yeah.
But that's just like a previewing setting.
Yeah.
I don't believe there's a hard way to bake in those pixel values.
Yeah, I don't think
Right?
there's like an easy way. You could certainly do it with like expressions and math and stuff, but yeah, I don't think there isn't like a setting or something to switch it to pixel values.
Yeah.
It's all supposed to be flexible. Okay, is there a performance difference between using shape system versus using masks on a background?
I believe there is. I'm not a big like benchmark guy. And especially like one background versus like one shape system would be tough. I've never tossed it into like I've never built a complex scene in both systems and really gone head to head. The only time I've done that, right when S-Text came out, I created a whole bunch of plain text nodes and put them into a multi-merge, and then did a whole bunch of S-Text nodes inside the shape system. And the normal text nodes did marginally better. And I feel like that is mostly a testament to how the S-Text node by itself has got a lot of specific attention from the Fusion team. Like that's popped up in notes a few times, and I know that's something they really care about performance. I would more expect the difference to show, with a lot of those like backgrounds and extra masking and stuff.
Yeah. My guess is that shapes probably run a little faster. That's than masking a background. Having done a lot of masking backgrounds for the cartoon, I know that once you get a few of those, it gets pretty intense, especially if you have keyframes on your masks.
What was I wrong about your cartoon last year? Was it all in normal shapes and masks?
Those were just masks on backgrounds. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was slightly before they released the S polygon, I believe.
Oh, which was the I do it.
All right. Is the extrude 3D option capable of interacting with other 3D nodes, lights, for example?
Absolutely. Like once you are here, you are in the normal 3D system. I pulled on these templates because while I was running through practice, it took me longer than I would like to get a simple spotlight. But yeah, your normal spotlights, your normal shadows. Once you're here, you are in the 3D system proper. Anything you are used to, you can have interact with this.
Yep.
Pulling it into a text, like with a camera tracker and that sort of thing.
All right. Is it possible to import some vector art and then extrude it, or convert a PNG or something like trace function that can be extruded, thinking like 3D logos?
Kind of like that SVG question, there isn't that great import option. Your best option, I would actually be interested in this, thinking through how that coordinate system changes. Here, I would kind of take advantage of the classic like 2 viewer options. If you had an S polygon over here and you just pulled up your reference here, you should be able to create your mask directly over the reference. Like it's not an auto outline, but like you can zoom in and go edge by edge. And if I had to do it, that's how I do it.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's not a bad way. I know. I think Camera Tim has a video on converting a PNG logo into an SVG and then bringing that in and extruding it. Pretty much exactly what you asked. And it's kind of a process, but you can do it. And I'm sure that's going to be much easier in the future. But right now it's sort of
especially that import option. Like that feels primed. That feels primed for a small update that makes things a lot better. And even something like this outline option, like a saying I'm really fond of, I think I picked it up from Andrew Kramer, is that especially when you're like it's that it's faster to do things the slow way of like, especially when you're in that zone of like, I think I saw a way to do this really efficiently in auto. But if it's going to take you twice as long to learn how to do it that way, like,
unless you have to do it 100 times or something. I mean, if you're just doing it once, then you might just tour de force, you know? Oh man, Patrick, this was great, man. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
This was awesome. Yeah, man. Thank you for showing us all about the shapes. Thank you for showing us all about the motion VFX. They are great. Again, big thank you to them for sponsoring this this segment, as well as ResolveCon, and for all the amazing things they've done for us. So and legit, like, super quality templates and plugins and everything are being made there. I don't know who's working on that stuff, but he must be pretty smart.
A whole lot of people. A whole lot of people.
Yes. All right. Well, hey, Patrick, we'll let you go, man. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.